Hi, Bridgette.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Everybody, this is Bridgette Mouton. She is part of our PAX team and a nurse, and I'll let you introduce yourself here in a minute. But we want to take a little bit of time as we're getting to know everybody here at PAX to find out about you and what you do, which is so unique and such a um, valuable tool that hasn't even been explored in most of the US, I think. Right?
Yeah,
So, give us just a short history of you.
sure. All right. So my name is Bridgette Mouton. I'm born and raised in Lafayette, Louisiana. I am a registered nurse. Began my career in the NICU. So I'm bumping up on 18 years in the medical field. And about 6 years ago, I ran into MNRI. When I ran into Dr. Masgutova's method, I was actually searching for some answers for my own children. And then I just took a deep dive and I haven't turned back since.
Yep. And that's what we're doing today. We're taking, well, maybe we're going to snorkel.
Yeah, let's just kind of,
We're not going to take the deep dive.
yeah, we can deep dive later.
Yes, we'll deep dive later, but not right now.
For sure.
MNR, MNRI stands for,
Dr. Masgutova's Neurosensorimotor Reflex Integration.
and there's a whole approach to it. There are programs to
Yep.
it. But how did this even come to be?
So Dr. Masgutova began all of her work way back in the 1980s in response to a terrible train wreck where
In Poland.
in Poland, where they were taking the kind of creme de la creme out for a vacation. And there was a horrible accident. People were burned. They were rushed over to the ERs. And it seemed as though due to their, not just their physical trauma, but their emotional trauma too,
Mhm,
that people were just dying from the shock.
mhm.
And so she was called into the hospital and she immediately recognized that she would not be able to do traditional talk therapy because she does have a deep background in psychology. And so she kind of whipped out these active movements, and people began to heal. They began to beg for touch. And so she was able to move those bodies who were burned, some from head to toe, some wailing for hours at a time. She was able to pull those bodies out of that trauma, out of that deep shock,
Mm.
to be able to even receive touch because some of them were so deeply traumatized that the medical staff could not even address their needs because of them not receiving touch at all. They had to be sedated to
So
do any of
how
the
did she
procedure.
do that? I mean, when you say
So,
she did it, but she couldn't touch.
right. So she actually whipped out one of her brain gym manuals and began integrating some of the tools that were discovered um, based on primitive reflex patterns. So
Mhm.
the patterns that our bodies experience in utero, she began to sort of take that along with her background in brain gym and began to mirror a few of the movement patterns for these bodies. And as she began to progress, replicating these patterns and these movements, the bodies began to heal. Really, they came out of shock. And I remember her telling us this beautiful story about how one of the victims said, "Hey, touch me right here." After having burns all over their bodies, how they began to beg for human touch. And it's just healing, right?
Mm.
So the method has, gosh, since then, her Polish Institute has done amazing things. We have protocols for every sort of neurodivergence. But what I find intriguing is that she began addressing trauma.
So
And
for the
that
layperson, neurodivergent means what?
it just means that the nervous system is functioning in a less efficient pattern than what would be ideal, right? So the neurotypical person may be able to transition from task to task very, very easily. Someone who has deep neurodivergence, they may need sort of some cueing, right? They may need a little bit of support to be able to transition.
Mm.
So these bodies, right, that were stuck in trauma at that
Yep.
train wreck, they all needed that extra support. And that's what MNRI does. It supports the nervous system by
So in
using
many
those same
ways,
patterns.
if I'm trying to break it down and try to understand it
Yeah,
myself, neurodivergent is kind of like in a house where you've got your electrical system, the body's the electrical system, and wires got crossed.
sure.
It,
That's a good one.
will that work?
Yeah, that'll
And
totally
and
work.
then part of what MNR or what MNRI does is try and keep the source of energy in the nervous system flowing again and not crossing and shorting out.
Right. So maybe to kind of add just a smidge more
Please.
clarity, right?
Yeah.
So if we were talking in terms of an electrical system, which we are, the nervous system is how energy is transmitted, how information is processed throughout our body. What we do with MNRI is we help the body to use the most efficient pathways. So it's not that the pathways are not present because we know the human code is the code, right? It's that because of trauma, because of dysfunction, because of pathology, sometimes we don't use the most efficient pathway to get that information, that energy
Right.
from, say, the microwave to the electric box, right?
Right.
Or the electric box to, say, your TV. Like if you ever plug in too many appliances at once and then things start shorting out, that's kind of how our nervous system is. If we start having too many things sucking energy in an inefficient way, then at some point we have dysfunction or pathology.
And that's a
Disease.
wonderful description of what trauma is, right?
Yes,
Trauma to the body,
for
trauma,
sure.
whether it's physical trauma, emotional trauma,
Mm-hmm.
sexual trauma,
Right.
the body shorts out.
Yes.
And so this, this will be so fascinating. But here's this NIC unit nurse finds out about MNRI. How did you see it potentially being applicable to what you're doing?
Oh, wow. So, like I said, initially I was searching for answers for my own child, right? But as I began studying Dr. Masgutova's method, oh man, the transition for our smallest, our littlest of littles, right? You know, when a baby's born premature, they miss out on all of that neural development that they would have had in utero, right? So they're pulled out of this anti gravity environment, the safe womb space, and they're plucked onto a warmer where they miss out on lots of patterns, lots of neural development because we're in the NICU, traditional medicine. What we're doing is we're going to get that body to survive, right?
Right.
Now, when we
But not
start adding,
necessarily repair.
not necessarily thrive is what I
Okay,
like
there
to
you
say,
go. Okay.
right?
Like that.
Because when we see our micro preemies come and start maybe hitting a few of their milestones, at what cost, right? So are they actually using their full potential or are they kind of drawing from other areas that may later in life cause a problem? Like how many teenagers we see, oh, they started out as a micro preemie or maybe just a little premature, maybe a C-section, maybe had a little respiratory trouble, which really when that first gasp doesn't happen, it sort of flips all of those reflex patterns. So, yeah, they're going to hit milestones. They're going to survive. They're going to do okay. but then maybe they'll get into school and they might have trouble reading. They might have a lot of trouble with math. They may not be able to write the way, a neurotypical body would. And that's all because of birth trauma. That's all because of that very beginning. And so, boy, when I was presented with that information, I was just over the moon, right? I just couldn't believe it, the great opportunity we have for the absolute earliest intervention that we have ever had in the United States, right? Being able to get into that nervous system. And Dr. Masgutova always says 7 minutes after birth is too late, right? So
7 minutes?
7 minutes.
Wow.
So the sooner a body who's experienced any kind of issue, which in the United States, I want to say the percentage is like 98, 99% of births experience some sort of medical intervention. Any medical intervention during the birth process can cause some issues with the reflex patterns.
Trauma.
Exactly.
And so PTSD
Oh,
is one of the big things I know that, again, she goes to this train wreck and is dealing with not just physical trauma, but the emotional trauma of the impact and losing lives and all that stuff.
yes.
And so in our psychotherapy, then post-traumatic stress disorder is also a neurological
Of course.
issue. It changes so much of the neural pathways in the brain and the body.
Yep.
And so that would make sense then, that as she's kind of uncovering this trauma work, and even birth, which can be trauma,
Right. Sure.
that PTSD would be something immediately that you all, that MNRI can begin to help.
Of course. Oh, yes. Dr. Masgutova has done extensive trauma work. And so we have everything from active protocols that people can kind of take these movement patterns and use them for their own bodies, to table protocols where we begin to support the body with our hands, right? Because this is a touch therapy modality, to allow the nervous system to begin to experience safety internally, right? To address that inner peace, right? And sort of reestablish that.
So touch therapy modality. Okay, so that means that if I come to you and you're going to treat me with MNRI, what happens? I come in.
So we use therapy tables, which looks much like a massage table, but without all the bells and whistles. And we often will start with a very simple session where we just kind of gauge how the body receives touch, right?
Okay, so when you say massage, so then anybody who's listening, okay, is this clothes on, clothes off? What is it?
Fully dressed.
Okay.
No, definitely all on top of clothes, right? Because our goal here is not, clothes is good.
Yeah, clothes is good. Well, you'll still get.
Dan.
What's that?
You're cracking me up.
Sorry. Hey, when you say massage table,
right,
people want to ask that because that's part of the thing, especially if you've been in trauma.
Oh gosh, yes.
You may not. And one of the safest things to do oftentimes is to be fully clothed, right?
Oh gosh, yes.
Before you even think about letting someone touch you.
Oh my goodness, right.
So again, that's why I kind of interrupted
I'm
that.
so happy you did, although, you made me laugh.
Yeah, but so I'm laying on the table, fully clothed on my back.
So we lay on the therapy table, right, which is a flat, firm surface, fully clothed. We will work initially into what we call tendon and ligament guard, just to see how the body receives that touch. Does it create stress in the body to be touched, right? That's kind of like the basic right there. We get on the table, we see how the body's laying, we pay attention to which sides may be in protection, which sides may be just kind of loosey goosey, right? And we start there. We always begin with sort of an archetypal movement. We use Dr. Masgutova's archetypes. And so we'll move through those first and just see how the body receives that input.
So if I'm laying on the table, what am I feeling you do?
So you are feeling me engage into neurosensorimotor points, right? So it is a gentle, firm touch as I move through the body. So Dr. Masgutova has us use various different techniques to move from point to point, engaging those archetype patterns. So you will feel gentle, firm pressure.
So cool, right?
I'm like, what's next?
I mean, for me in my mind and everybody that's watching, I've been on the table, so I do know.
Yeah.
And it's very much, you're describing it in a way that I could never describe it. But it really, it feels like all the pathways are getting opened up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know what I'm saying when I say it that way, but I'm just trying to give you the
Yes.
experience is like everything's opening up.
It's true. So, what I hear most bodies say after a session is that they feel, number one, incredibly relaxed. Number two, they feel really grounded and safe. They feel secure, right? And then
That's it.
when I hear you use the word, I feel like pathways are opening up. I'm like, well, of course, because you're using an efficient pattern, right? And so Dr. Masgutova's work allows for more energy efficiency, right? So you just feel better, right? You have more available ATP energy to do life. Life becomes easier. You don't have as many lulls in the middle of your day. Like, that afternoon coffee, not saying I don't have mine because
Right there.
I do. It is watered down.
Yes, I saw everybody. It was.
But it really does. That's usually the first thing people will be able to recognize is that, wow, I have more energy. I feel more grounded. My body feels so safe, right? And we know from from your trauma work that often someone who's experienced a huge trauma in their life, they don't feel safe inside anymore. And they suffer from hypervigilance. And we know that that increases cortisol. Now, when cortisol, the stress hormone, is floating around the body, we know that that damages the nervous system. It actually demyelinates it. So it can make all kinds of other things go awry.
Okay, so I kind of wrote down a little map here. What I'm aware of, and maybe you can maybe break this open a little bit more, but I know that you work with school-age children.
Sure.
Who may have attention deficit behavioral problems.
Yes.
I know that you work with the babies.
I love my moms and my babies.
But see, that's the other piece. And you work with the moms too.
Yes. Yeah, because this is a lifespan approach. So, as much as I love the idea of a body finding freedom from trauma, this is a wellness approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking across the lifespan how in each developmental stage, the body can live its best life, how you can find fullness and joy in each stage as you transition from, first half of life, second half of life, school age, college, all the things.
Would it be safe to say your experience is much more than mine, but if a baby has had, a preemie has had, there's a preemie and there's trauma, mom's had trauma.
Oh, 100% yes. Oh my goodness, 100% yes. So the experience of birthing a child early, right? When, your expectation is to have that human in your womb space, in that safe space.
Mhm.
That initial break, that trauma is just as significant for mama as it is for baby, and sometimes lingers longer
For
for
mom.
mama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so even,
The hormone, right? Let's not even get into the hormone picture, right? You have a preemie, and we are designed with these beautiful, intricately created hormone pictures. But boy, having a baby early, throws your body into just chaos.
yeah. And then, and kind of close to home when like Jane was getting ready to give birth to our first, Rebecca, we were we were going along, we were in the hospital, we were doing our Lamaze, and then the doc says, we need to have a C-section.
Oh,
And that too is a shock to both the physical system, but the
mm,
psychological system of the mom too.
almost definitely. Almost definitely. Especially when you have this idea of what you want for your baby's birth, right? And especially it ending in C section, right? Because our bodies need that travel all the way out to the outlet. It needs that movement to be able to integrate our reflex patterns.
Mm,
And mama needs the completion of this task, right? Once a baby is conceived, that mama has been given a task to see to completion, whether baby is born by C-section, vacuum extraction, or even a lost child, right? Someone who loses that baby very early, it's an incomplete task. And so we know that not finishing something, leaving a loose end and not being able to bring it full circle can really be damaging for the body.
so miscarriages,
Yes, miscarriages.
because there's a whole grieving that goes
Oh,
along with it, but that's its own trauma.
exactly. Exactly. The miscarriage itself, the actual picture of the hormones when you've had a baby, your body has prepared for this baby, and then you don't bring home that baby, right? And so your hormones are prepared, and then you have grief on top of that sort of cascade of ugh, what our bodies suffer for. And Dan, when you talk about miscarriage, it's a big deal for daddies too, right?
Mhm.
Because when a child is
Been through
conceived,
it.
yeah, daddies have a task, right? And whether it's a miscarriage or maybe not the birth that you dreamed of, daddy also suffers.
Right.
So it's a big deal.
The helplessness that a daddy can feel if a child is whisked away to ICU.
Oh,
The
right?
uncertainty of knowing, is my wife going to be okay after the C-section? Is,
Yes.
is my wife going to be okay after the miscarriage? But C-section, the difficult birth, and then the baby's in ICU. There's this helplessness in the male that starts to really dysregulate our nervous system.
Right, because papas want to protect. They want to provide and protect. And the NICU is not a place that fosters protection and provision by the papa.
Right.
I mean, we
Or
don't do
either
that,
parent.
or
Either.
either parent, because we are so deeply focused on survival of that body, which is a beautiful thing.
Right.
What I think the best way to frame up MNRI in birth trauma, miscarriage, all of it is that MNRI supports the bodies, right? The bodies involved. It supports your body to complete the task, right? And Dr. Masgutova will talk about a complete circuit, which means that the
So
energy,
that's electrical, right?
yes, she goes right back into the complete circuit
Yeah.
because the energy, the information comes in and it goes straight to the part of the brain that processes it and right back out to create the most appropriate response. When there's deep trauma, all of that is disrupted.
So we could drill down into that for another hour, but let's come
Oh my
back
God,
if we can.
I know. I get
Let's
excited. Sorry.
I know, and I love it too. So I'm just watching our time.
Yes, yes, yes.
School age kids. I know you work a lot with school age kids.
And you know what? I love working with the school age children because this is why I jumped in, right? I jumped into MNRI because of my own daughter's struggles in school. She'd always been a hard worker. She always had to work very hard to excel in school, and she was a
Mhm,
good student. She kind of bumped up on the teenage years, and things just collapsed. School became too hard. Her
mhm,
grades plummeted. She was no longer the social butterfly that she, naturally was.
mhm,
It became really hard. So when working with school age children, we sort of go from both angles with the active M&RI work. I always try to have the children take these movement patterns home with them so that they can kind of own their process. We talk about MNRI helping them to be their best selves, right? We want to help them maximize their potential. And actually, Dr. Masgutova calls one of her courses Maximizing Brain Potential.
mhm.
Because what we're doing is that we're allowing the body to use its most efficient pathways to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So rather than having to go through the disorientation when kids flip letters and words, right?
Mhm,
We can then allow the body to see the word, decode it without becoming disoriented, right? Because we see a
mhm.
lot of that in dyslexia. A lot of the kids that pop in, we have attention deficit, right? Where we know that's directly linked to the retention of spinal gland, right? We need to be able to get into lateral flexion of the body. That's also the root of bedwetting.
Now I'm gonna jump in here
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and think of myself as the average parent. I worked in the high school for a long time. I've never heard anything like that about ADD, ADHD,
yeah.
dyslexia, right? And
Hmm.
so, not that there's anything wrong with medication if needed,
No, 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 no.
but there's other things happening that you can at least give a crack at to begin treating and maximize a student's not just potential but capability, ability.
Oh gosh, to be able to access their truest potential, right? And so I am never one to say, oh, medicine is all bad. That's not my approach ever because I started in the hospitals.
Right.
And I know there's good medicines. But boy, to pair MNRI with the proper dosage, the proper medication for that proper genetic code, ooh, we can really create some synergy when we pair those two things together. ADHD, attention deficit, all of these things, even our kids that have autism, right? If
Mhm.
you get the right medicines with the proper support, hmm, the sky's the limit.
So we've got with kids, school age kids, ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, processing issues.
Sure, sensory processing is huge.
If I'm a parent and I've got children, I go, how would I know if MNRI is appropriate for my child? What other things would be part of that?
Okay, I can't help but to smile, right?
Why?
Because if you are a human thinking,
Hmm.
MNRI is a good thing for you, right? I know what it sounds like, right? It sounds really, of course, she's going to say everybody can benefit. But really, everybody can benefit from MNRI because some kids that don't suffer from ADD and ADHD they might have some social anxiety, right? They
Right.
might be a perfectionist to a fault. I've had my friends bring in their kids because their perfectionism was getting in the way of them even attempting a
Yeah.
new sport or a new subject matter. Some of these kids are geniuses. But
Performance anxiety,
yes,
social anxiety,
for sure.
and even if the symptom severity isn't always severe, mild and moderate symptoms of anxiety, depression
Hmm.
affect the functionality of the child.
It's true. It's true.
So
And
yeah, I hear you.
yeah.
Everybody, it's like the way I feel about counseling, right? Everybody can benefit from counseling
Oh gosh,
if
yeah.
you're willing to do the inner work, right?
It's
The
so
journey. Everyone's going to benefit from MNRI, but I think for here too, we want to say it doesn't have to be the most severe. It doesn't have to be
oh,
a
no.
diagnosable thing. But if there is anxiety, if there is distress, if the child is socially anxious, performance anxious,
Yes.
other things, MNRI can help, be
Right.
a big help.
Right. And a lot of times we don't realize just how our neurotypical children kind of amp up for starting a new grade, for getting ready for, say, camp, getting ready for summer camp. Sometimes just to settle the nervous system, just enough so that they
Mm,
can walk into it as their best selves. I've got clients that when their kids start a new sport, a camp, a new play, they're like, hey, can we get her or him in just so that they can show up as their best
right.
self? Like, it's not, it doesn't have to be a big issue. And I think that's what I love about MNRI is that we really are wellness focused, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to have cancer to eat well.
So another question a parent might have.
Sure.
So I bring my child to you. How often is my child going to see you? How is that going to go? What's the
Sure.
treatment plan?
Okay, so I am definitely not the traditional therapist because I feel like therapy has to fall into the family's schedule. I feel like when a parent is trying to juggle things and getting in sessions 4 or 5 times a week, that the family itself, the family unit suffers. So, depending on what our goals are and where we are in the process, you might pop in once a week. You may do twice a week for a couple of weeks. But I have a lot of kids who come and see me weekly for 6 to 8 weeks, and then I see them every 3 months.
Mhm.
And then after they get to 3 months, maybe I see them every 6 months.
Or it could be
Right?
situational, right? Like a
Yes,
performance in a play or a
of
big game or
course.
something.
Of course.
Yeah.
And at those times, we address, with whatever intensity the body is feeling, that's how we support it. We meet the body's intensity with the proper support.
Right. Awesome. Let's go to. I'm watching our time. Let's go to um, two other areas here. Um, but I'll kind of close. You also deal with kids with special needs, of course,
Yes.
right? You mentioned autism, probably Asperger's on the spectrum,
Sure.
um, even Down syndrome kids. I know we've got some
Yeah.
special kids here that come and show up. But so that's there. Let's go to adults.
Sure.
Us adults who, like me,
Well,
and I took advantage of it um, because I was getting real stuck in stress,
yeah.
and my functional health trainer
Hmm.
said, uh, "We're stuck.
Yeah.
Your body is holding on to so much stress, so much trauma from sports, car accidents,
Right.
life.
Right.
Um, I think you should see this girl, Bridgette. I can't tell you what she does," was her phrase, "but I think she will really help you." And sure enough, after that first session, it was like, "Ooh, something fundamental." Like I said, the pathways opened up,
Right. Right.
right? And so,
Yes. So adult bodies, right? Because we live in this go, go, excel, excel, attain, attain world, right?
Hmm.
Even if we don't have severe dysfunction, severe pathology, huge injury, our bodies have been exposed to way too much cortisol for way too much time, right?
Hmm.
And, sometimes we don't eat well, so we don't move well, then we don't sleep well. So the human body needs support, point blank, period. And what I think is so cool about the adults that pop in the office is that they often have the words to verbalize, right? Exactly how they're feeling before and after. Because I've seen everything under the sun, I feel, over the past few years, from bodies just seeking wellness to noting that I'm losing mobility and function. So, hey, I got to do something. And, when you can't do what you want to do, you want to get some help. And so we can restore function. MRI can allow the body to experience freedom on the level that it probably thought was lost.
Mm. So cool. If you could try to simplify.
Okay.
I'm a person with, okay, my stress, a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And got off the table and I said, I feel grounded. I feel like my feet are on the floor for the first time. I feel like my pathways are open.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what happened to me?
I love it.
What did you do to me?
So, a lot of times, the very first experience of safe touch with the proper timing, the proper position, the proper pattern, the proper intensity can allow the body to receive information, energy in a way that it had forgotten, right?
Mhm.
Because we kind of get into this pattern of, oh, I'm going to grin and bear it, right?
Right.
And then after a while, we can grin and bear only so much. We can only do so much. We can only add so much pressure until it has to be dispersed.
Hmm.
And so working into the reflex pattern, right? And doing that sort of very safe, gentle, firm pressure. And I mean, I don't know if you mind, but the
Oh,
very
go
first
ahead.
time you were on the table, we only worked neurotactile protocol, which is just engaging the skin. I don't think we got into anything else for probably the first month, because just allowing their skin receptors to function as they should is a huge help for your overall wellness. We have to remember that skin is the biggest organ we have. So, can you imagine if we allowed those cells, those receptors, to function at its optimal, most efficient capacity? Just think what we're doing for our organs.
Hmm. It's so neat. And again, my own testimony, and you've been a part of that, is the first time I got on the table, about three-quarters of the way through, you said, okay, turn over and go to your stomach. Well, I had to crawl off the table, stand up, turn around, right? I couldn't even do it. My hips, my back was just one
Mhm. It was
locked
one
muscle,
solid piece. So your head could move,
barely.
the rest of your body couldn't,
Right.
right?
And
And
then later, there are and now I can actually turn on the table without having to actually get off the table and get back on.
which is cool. It's like mental rolling.
And it feels like different parts. Again, when the body feels more open, it can do what it's supposed to do.
Yes. And it can heal.
And so one of my big joys, though, and you know this, I've told you this, is that I can get on the floor now with the grandkids,
Oh, I love that.
right, and play with them, and
I
then
love
get
it.
back up.
Right.
It's one thing to get down; it's another thing to get back up. But I can do that now, and where A year ago, I could not, and you
Right.
know that.
I love it.
You
I
know,
love it.
um, so much more to talk about. But we've got to kind of watch our time. We'll probably come back and go into the. We just kind of waded in the water. Next time we may do a little snorkeling before we do the deep dive. Um,
Totally open to it.
but if someone is wondering, I wonder if this is for me. How
Sure.
how what would you say to them?
So I would say if you are wondering if MNRI is the missing piece, right? Number one, do your research. Check out the website so that you can see what you're getting into. Number two, everyone with an electrical system within their body can benefit. So, even if this doesn't become a staple in your wellness routine, having the experience is going to help you to put things into perspective.
And that, Bridget, that's just so important. Um, for me, is it's one thing to study it, but it's another thing to experience it,
It's so true.
right? Like I can tell you what's on a cheese and sausage pizza, but until I give you that piece, you don't know what it's going to taste like.
It's so true.
And so many of these things you can look, and again, yeah, you can go, those of you that Google MNRI, and the Masgutova method will be right there. And there's more information and the science behind it and all that. But until you experience it,
Yes.
and even then, as you know, I have a hard time saying what I experienced, but it was
Right.
wonderfully helpful.
Right. It's been such a blessing for my children, for me,
Mhm.
and just to watch the bodies that are brought to me in service, right? To watch those bodies find freedom, it's been a great journey.
And so I'm going to think out loud here. Oftentimes, when I talk about counseling, when people say, "Well, how does counseling really work?"
Mhm.
It's so complex that it's hard to break it down in simplicity, but it's usually about the experience of human connection, where through dialogue and even maybe some physical action, we take what feels disordered or out of order and
Wow.
organize it again to a
Mm-hmm.
place that makes sense and either reduces fear, reduces symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
reduces whatever, right? But gives you that sense of it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in a similar way, now that I'm thinking about it, my body was in this disorganized, still is, but it's was really disorganized when we first started. And now we're taking the pieces and we're organizing them into putting them where they belong, having them function the way they're supposed to function,
I
having
love
the nervous system do what it's supposed to do.
exactly. Exactly. And so much like conscious therapy, MNRI uses our hands to work with the subconscious,
Right.
with those electrical pathways to create more order. To
And
show
even
you
though it's
how they-
passive,
Yes.
right, it is incredibly activating.
Oh, yes.
Like that?
I like that.
But it's true because you're laying there and you're being passive, right?
Yes.
But there's a lot of activation happening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Just, and the same thing with similarly with counseling. We may be talking about something, but in the other conscious,
Yes.
there's other stuff that's being activated that we don't even
Mhm.
know about until maybe a few days later.
It's
But
so
the same
true.
but the same thing, you activated something and you activate something in me
Mhm.
through the method of MNRI. I may not even be aware of it, but I experience something different.
It's true. It's true. And it's that experience of that something different, right? That sort of sparks the curiosity of, oh, if I feel this way after this experience, oh, I wonder what else there is in the world, right? I just think that for some adult bodies, MNRI can take you out of the rut of even burnout and can kind of open up Pavlov in a way that says, oh, I didn't think of doing life this way. So it's a beautiful support, right? Especially, for those of us in the second half of life trying to figure this out.
Right. And the other thing, going back to that passive activation, oftentimes, especially if we're going to go back to the trauma topic, we don't have the language yet for it.
Yes.
We don't even know if we want to have the language for what we experienced.
Yep.
And so the modality of MNRI comes in through a back door, actually the
Mhm.
front door.
Right.
Okay.
The
Comes in
first door.
Yeah, but it doesn't require language yet. It doesn't require tapping into the fear space of the brain. It
Right.
actually begins to settle the body in a way that it doesn't even know it needs to be settled,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So even people that may not, know that they may have had some trauma and they just they're not even ready for the languaging of it,
Hmm.
can still benefit because again you are activating for the client
Hmm.
their nervous system which knows how to heal itself.
Exactly. You're reminding the body it's natural. And as Dr. M says, it's innate intelligence. It's natural, most organic, most primitive way of healing from the inside out. It's the way God designed us.
And so again it can be a great stepping stone to begin physical therapy, counseling therapy.
Yes,
It can just be the great gentle starter because you start in that safe space.
exactly. Yep. And we start from a perspective that says, there's nothing wrong. You are not wrong. You don't need to be fixed. Your body needs the support to remember who it is, right?
Mhm.
To kind of debride those receptor sites, to kind of get some of the junk off so that you can live your best life and be who God called you to be.
Mhm. Okay, we're going to wrap it up.
All right. All right.
Bridgette, thanks so much.
All right.
I'm
Awesome.
so glad we got to introduce you to the community too, right? Of
Um,
Lafayette and Pax. And you're such an asset and a blessing to our team and to those who you do work with. Folks who are interested, you can go to Google and MNRI, and you will find the Masgutova method website. Or if you want to make an appointment with Bridgette, call us here at the Pax Renewal Center. Um, go to our website, paxrenewalcenter.com. You can read a little bit more about Bridgette, and I think we have a little thing on MNRI on that. Or call our office, 337 993 1960 to do the shameless plug. And thanks. We had
Thank
fun.
you.
We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
We'll do it again.
Thank
All
you.
right, Dan. See you soon.